Now, I've been with the department since 2006. I started as a student intern and just really fell in love with the work. And I just really believe in the department's mission. Growing up in a lower income single parent household, I really saw the value in the information that I just wasn't exposed to all of the time. And I've stayed with the department all of these years because I'm just really proud of the work and the dedication that I see in the department and the colleagues, and how that truly shines through in our policies and our programming and the impact that I've seen it have on the communities that we serve. And today, I'll be covering just three topics with you: just what the Housing and Tenant Protections Division does, uh, the county's temporary eviction moratorium, and also a new program that's called Stay Housed LA County. Now, while DCBA has assisted tenants and landlords for quite some time, it's only recently expanded to include a separate division to further tenant protections. It's no secret that we live in one of the most unaffordable housing markets in the nation, with more than half of the county's residents are being referred to as what's called rent burdened. And that means that they're just paying a significantly high percentage of their income towards their housing expenses. And this is due in large part to the significant increase in housing prices and wages that just have not been able to rise at nearly the same rate. In 2018, the Board of Supervisors directed our department, along with other partner agencies, and some of which you'll hear from today, to draft and implement what will become the county's rent stabilization program. Now, this program is designed to promote housing stability through its programming, which includes the rent stabilization and mobile home rent stabilization ordinances, which limit rent increases for covered units and spaces, and also protects against evictions without just cause. The division also oversees the eviction defense program, which I'll cover as well. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has further impacted tenants' ability to afford housing. There was a recent study that was published by UCLA called UD Day, and that estimates that there are at least 365,000 renter households that don't have an adult who's either employed or has sufficient replacement income to pay rent. And so I just wanted to, it's something that strikes me as really alarming, and just really underscores, the need for these types of policies. And I want to also acknowledge that there's a lot of information to navigate, as these measures are just being added and are constantly changing at this point. And so one of the measures that has been implemented since March includes the county's eviction moratorium. And so it's went into effect March 4th of this year. And it currently sunsets January 31st of next year, unless it's further extended by the board. The moratorium is designed to prevent residential and commercial tenants, along with mobile home space renters, from being displaced if or evicted if they can't pay rent due to COVID-19. These rules prohibit landlords from imposing any new pass-throughs during the moratorium, charging late fees or interest, and any other related charges for the unpaid rent during the repayment period. These protections apply to residential and commercial tenants in LA County, with a few exceptions. If you need assistance figuring out which rules apply to you, because there are so many layers between the county, other jurisdictions within the county, including some cities like Los Angeles, and also the state and the federal moratoriums, our counselors can help you identify which protections cover your residents. It's also really important to understand that this is not a waiver of rent. So this is what's called a rent deferral, meaning that if you can't pay, you can't be evicted for it at this time, but once it's been lifted, you will need to repay that rent. And you will be given anywhere from 6 to 12 months to repay any past due rent. If you're a tenant and you're unable to pay rent, you should find out which moratorium applies to you. So reach out to us if you're not sure. Notify your landlord as soon as possible if you can't pay your rent. The county has specific rules. You need to notify your landlord within 7 days of rent being due. And also try to work with your landlord to reach a resolution. If you're able to pay some or all of your rent right now, we do recommend that you do that to reduce the amount that you'll need to pay back once the moratorium is over. And I wanted to share, lastly, I wanted to share a new program that we recently launched by the name of Stay Housed LA County. Now, this program is one of the first of its kind in the county, and it's only a handful of large-scale legal defense programs for tenants in the country, and this is going to provide much-needed support for low-income renters facing eviction and for renters living in vulnerable communities throughout the county. This isn't a campaign where we just give the information and tell them how to avoid Eviction, it was thoughtfully designed to provide comprehensive support for the tenants who are being evicted despite some of the existing protections in place. Now, there are four components to the program. It will provide full and limited scope legal representation, some short term rental assistance, and also access to Know Your Rights workshops and access to other wraparound services in the county. And they're available to low income renters no matter where they reside in the county. Now, this is a sorely needed program, and it's being made possible through a public private partnership between the County of LA, community based organizations, and legal service providers from the Los Angeles Right to Counsel Coalition. It's a true testament to the hard work and commitment of advocates, service providers, and local government to promote and preserve a healthy and stable LA County. And this is going to level the playing field for a lot of our vulnerable county residents. One other alarming statistic that I found with working with the coalition is that 90% of tenants do not have access to actually go to eviction court without representation. And so this is something that will help to change that. And this is going to be, again, the first line of defense for the oncoming wave or tsunami of evictions as it's being described that we expect to see once these protections start to lift. Now, if you're a tenant and you have questions about your eviction protections, or you're a landlord and you want to know about your rights and responsibilities, you can call and speak with one of our counselors by dialing 833 223 7368. Again, that's 833 223 7368. We are available Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 5:30 to answer any questions. You can also visit us online at rent.lacounty.gov, or you can visit lacountyhelpcenter.org for a list of all of our available resources. Myself, on behalf of the DCBA team, and I am committed to continuing to protect our most vulnerable and to strengthening relationships with our community partners and with the support of our board to help us navigate through these unprecedented times.
And so, this housing crisis is different from the Great Recession of 2008. As you heard from my colleague Dana, this pandemic is impacting renters and property owners alike. And so today I'd like to focus my comments on property owners, whether you own a single family home or multiple units. So there is temporary relief for property owners, and they should know that there is a moratorium in place on foreclosures through January 2021. That means a servicer is unable to foreclose on a home at this time. There's also an opportunity if a property owner is eligible for a forbearance plan. And so a forbearance plan will temporarily reduce a mortgage or can pause a mortgage up to 6 months and maybe even up to 12 months if the property owner is eligible. They should know, though, Pilar, that these payments will become due in the future. And so if someone's experiencing financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, they may be eligible for one of these two types of relief from their servicer. And that hardship may include a loss of wages from being laid off, or maybe even a reduction in work hours. For those that are landlords, it may also include a loss in rental income. And so if this is the situation, I encourage property owners to do a few things. The first is they want to contact their lender to understand what options are available based on the mortgage that they hold. And so we have heard from constituents that some servicers may not necessarily offer these options up front. And so when a property owner calls for for the relief, they want to make sure that they're clear and stating their financial challenges, and also stating that it's related to COVID-19. That sort of seems to be the key word that services are looking for when someone calls. The second thing I'd like to note is that the county also has a team of counselors. Similar to Dana's team, I have a team of counselors that can help walk them through this process. And so if at any point they need guidance, I do encourage them to contact the county's Disaster Help Center. We do have a team of agents that can help to answer and connect them to these resources. And that phone number is 833-233 888-384450. And we have experienced housing counselors that can help property owners navigate this process. Our team is also working diligently with local nonprofit organizations that offer a similar service free of cost. So in the county, there are 14 HUD certified organizations that offer this type of counseling. And we're working to align our services to ensure that constituents actually have a safe place to go. We understand that for many homeowners, the home is their greatest asset and likely their family legacy. And so we are concerned that, like in any crisis, there are folks looking to take advantage of this vulnerability. Pilar, I get these flyers in my mailbox. I get text messages at all hours of the day. And in a neighborhood like mine of South LA, there's signs plastered in every light pole that says, "I will give you cash for your home." And so I understand that desperation may set in, but I encourage property owners that before they make a major decision on their property, that they connect with one of our counselors to make sure that they're understanding all of their options that are available to them before they make a decision on their property. I also understand that for some, this may be the first time that they need to reach out to their local government for support. And they should also know that we have a team of financial navigators that can help them not only connect to foreclosure services, but also help them to identify other county services that they may be eligible now with a reduction in income. So with that, I encourage folks to take the time to connect with us. This is the time for our government to step up and step into the role in really supporting our constituents, especially around property preservation.
Many of you may not know, but our department provides free mediation services to businesses and residents of Los Angeles County. Many times people who refer situations to nonprofit or government agencies are not familiar with mediation. So I'd like to take a moment to share what types of service we do provide. Mediation is an alternative dispute resolution service with the goal to resolve problems through dialogue and conversation. Our goal is to help parties communicate. Many times, parties feel that they're not being heard, whether it's by the landlord or tenant or a business or situation where it's a consumer. Nevertheless, our goal is to provide services to the community at no cost, whether it's community-based mediation or matters that are court-connected, meaning that have an access to court. Community disputes may be disputes like neighbor-to-neighbor disputes, family issues that aren't already in litigation, or businesses that do not have a court matter pending. Anything to do with a court dispute, meaning court-connected matters that involve litigation, do have an access to the court matter, can also be mediated. We do unlawful detainers, limited civil matters, small claims matters. In any sense, our goal is to help parties communicate. The unique thing about mediation, many times, hear about investigations or about fraud being investigated. Mediation is actually a voluntary confidential process where a neutral third party assists parties to communicate with one another. They're setting a safe environment for parties to be able to have dialogue. Many times, matters are resolved by just having that communication. Our resolution rate prior to the pandemic was 79% resolutions. So although I pride myself on the great work that our mediators do, it's not always about having a resolution. The goal here is for parties to communicate and feel understood. And that's huge because many times people feel like they're being ignored. So we really want to set that foundation for parties to just be able to come and communicate and have that dialogue that they may not be able to have without a neutral party. Some of the appropriate cases that we do deal with are landlord-tenant, whether it's security deposit, payment for unpaid rent, back rent owed during the pandemic. It could be any habitability issues where they're requesting repairs to be made. If there's situations where there's the landlord and tenant have a dialogue about breaking the lease, or if there's any rent increases, even though that shouldn't be happening during the pandemic. But if there are situations such as that, whether or not it's happening as a result of the pandemic, we do mediate those matters. Barking dogs, parking, noise complaints, similar matters to that. Anything to do with consumer merchant. During the pandemic, many people are unable to pay their debt. They're not able to make their car payment or credit card payment. And although the CARE Act may cover some of that, we can help parties communicate with the creditors so that they feel they're in control. They have part of the dialogue going, and it's, again, a conversation between the creditor and the debtor. A unique function of our department, our mediation department, is that we've been hosting online dispute resolution options since 2014. So what does that mean? That means that for parties that normally wouldn't be able to take advantage of in-person mediations, we have a platform where parties can actually make online bids. They could make an offer, and the other party could respond, all through the comfort of their home or business. They can actually chat with each other. They can do a portal message to the mediators. They can upload documents. Instead of faxing documents, it's just a process of uploading them to be able to easily be able to provide information, especially during this situation of the pandemic. One other program that we created back in 2018 is a mediation program for people experiencing homelessness. And that's huge. Unfortunately, a lot of times, most of the people that are experiencing homelessness may have issues with their shelters or nonprofit agencies where they're staying, and they feel like they have no control over the scenarios that are occurring. We pride ourselves on helping people experiencing homelessness try to resolve their disputes. And at the end of the day, it might not be necessarily what the parties are asking for, but it may be an alternative to not being heard at all. If I have time, one of the most touchful moments when we started this program was regarding a person who became homeless. Unfortunately, they were a professional person. They had financial means, they had a home, and unfortunately, they became drug addicted. This person became homeless and then went into rehab, successfully completed rehab, and then was being housed at a shelter. As you know, most people that are trying to seek shelter for the evening have to stand in line at whatever shelters are available. In this case, the homeless person shared with us that while they're waiting in line, that drug dealers were actually offering them drugs at no cost. And they felt that the shelter should provide more protection, more policing, more cameras, in order for them not to be engaged in the temptation of going back into drugs. Originally, they reached out to this shelter, and the shelter said that unfortunately it was not of their concern, since the streets were owned by the city, that they had no control over that. As a result of our mediation session, we ended up being able to help the homeless person communicate with the shelter their concerns and why they were concerned. And as a result, the shelter put in more lights and more foot placing for their staff to go up and down the line, so that they would feel that there was more attention, so that the drug dealers wouldn't reach out to the homeless individuals. That was a success in its rate. And there's many examples I can give you, but that one in itself really points out the value of mediation and being able to help individuals feel heard.
I'm a last minute addition to this panel, so forgive me if I'm not as well prepared as I'd like to be. But the reason I'm a last minute addition is because I didn't respond timely to the invitation, because I was overwhelmed with the response that was being given towards our emergency relief program for restaurants. You recall last week, the county closed down in-person dining that is outdoors for restaurants, and asked us to prop up a program immediately to provide grants to these restaurants. We launched on Thursday at midnight. The site crashed within 1 hour. So that is just to indicate how great the need is throughout the county. not only for renters, but for business owners alike. That's basically what we're up against. My particular agency administers a host of programs to include those that you may be familiar with, Section 8 and public housing. Collectively, those two provide housing for about 30,000 families throughout the county. Now, aside from the regular programming, we've also been asked to launch emergency programs for renters within the county. And we are now up to 4 different programs that we've launched. The largest of which has been the latest one that we launched in September, October, that basically was $100 million and is now $110 million that was set aside to provide emergency rent relief. In the first week, it was open for a 2-week period. We had over 60,000 renters that applied for the program. All told, in the 2-week period, we had nearly 90,000 households that applied for emergency rent relief. When you look at the city of LA similarly launched the rent relief program. They had an excess of 150,000 that applied for that program. So certainly you can see that the need is tremendous. Now, our program is somewhat different than many others that you'll see throughout the country. The vast majority of municipalities, including the city of LA, provided emergency relief for a 3-month period at a maximum of $3,000. In the city's example, it was $2,000 per household. Our board took a very different approach to try to provide meaningful and substantial assistance, since many folks have been in arrears for several months. So we did a targeted approach that really focused on those that were economically disadvantaged within communities that have been hardest hit by COVID. So communities like Bell Gardens, South Los Angeles, all of those communities that have seen a disproportionate impact from COVID are the focus of our relief efforts. That's at least 50% of the funding. The other 50% is available to the county as a whole. The grants are twofold. For those at 30% median income and below, it is a maximum of $10,000. So you can see it's substantive. For those at 50% median income and below, it's $7,500. So we are still working through all of those applications. We initially expected to fund between 9,000 to 10,000 households. But here's what we're finding. There are, when Dana spoke earlier about the eviction moratorium, and she spoke about all of these things that the county and the state put in place to try to protect renters. Many property owners complained that folks would take advantage of those ordinances and statutes and simply not pay their rent. Here's what we're finding. More than 70% of the people that we're providing grants to aren't getting the full amount of the benefit that they're eligible for. The reason being is many of them did everything that they could to remain caught up on their rent, including getting payday loans, putting it on their credit card, borrowing money from friends and family. So despite what folks were saying, that folks were taking advantage of this, we are finding that the exact opposite is true. People are doing everything that they can in their power to try to remain current on their rent. And it's indicative, based on the folks that we're helping, many of whom aren't taking the full amount of the benefit. Someone mentioned earlier, if our property owners able to decline assistance. So far, we have found that roughly 300 property owners have said no, even though we are basically getting their tenant completely caught up on the rent. We have some property owners that are simply not willing to accept that rental payment. And what we are finding in those instances in that it's because they are unwilling to fill out that W-9, meaning they may not be claiming that rent revenue to the federal government in the first place. We're also finding that we're hearing stories all over the place in terms of folks that were very stably housed for years and are now finding it next to impossible to get caught up on that rent. Even with all the protections in place, that allow folks to pay only 25% of their rent and keep protections in place, we know that a household that is making 30% of the median income or less is never going to be able to pay back $8, $9, $10,000 worth of rental arrearages. So this help that the county is providing is really providing a lifeline to those households that we're giving this assistance to. And I'm happy to answer questions about the rent relief program, but in addition to that, there are other things that we're doing to prevent homelessness in general. The county has also launched, in partnership with the state, an effort to purchase a slew of properties throughout the county. We were able to buy 10 hotels and motels throughout the county under Project HomeKey. These are properties that were purchased, negotiated within a 2-month period. The first one is set to launch later this month to provide housing for individuals that were already homeless and were perhaps housed under Project Roomkey. This is going to provide almost 1,000 units of supportive housing. Initially, these 10 properties are going to be used as interim housing, but as we refurbish them and turn them into full-scale studio apartments, they will be used as supportive housing for the county. There are also a host of ordinances that the county has passed, and even the state. Dana alluded to some of those earlier in her presentation, but all of those things work in tandem to actually prevent homelessness. So let's take a look at a couple of them. Source of income protection. I mentioned that we house about 30,000 people under our Section 8 program. Prior to January 1 of this year, it was perfectly legal for a property owner to say, I don't accept Section 8. And in cases where there were property owners with large amounts of properties, they could basically put ads in the paper, no Section 8 accepted at any of our properties. That is now illegal. Source of income protections basically do not allow landlords to discriminate against somebody based on the manner in which they pay their rent. So to give you an example, we have over 700 to 800 families every year who have a Section 8 voucher that are unable to secure a unit. That number has come down substantially, given that it is now illegal to do so. And even with that law and local ordinance in place, you may still see some of those ads. We always reach out to property owners to remind them and to notify them, this is now the law, you can no longer do that. And we work in tandem with DCBA to make sure that that communication gets out there. There are also other things that we're doing. We're providing incentives for property owners. The county has stepped up to provide its own funding so that property owners are incentivized to accept tenants with Section 8 vouchers. So we do things like pay for their security deposit. We pay a holding fee so there's no rental loss. We simply tell the property owner to hold the unit. We'll pay the first month's rent while we refer clients. They're not obligated to accept any of the referrals, but 90% of the folks that we work with actually wind up accepting a Section 8 client. We are also embarking on an anti-displacement and gentrification study to try to identify areas within the county that are most at risk of gentrifying so that we can target our resources to those areas and keep people stably housed. So there's a lot of different programs that we have in place. I just wanted to provide a very brief overview. I think all of these things work in tandem. One of the things that I'm very proud that our board has done is that it has taken homeless prevention as one of the key tools in addressing homelessness in general. So there are a lot of resources being targeted to help people remain in their home so that they don't have to be triaged on an emergency basis on the back end.